Guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today we got to go on a little bit of a rant because what I realized while I was, gearing up to level 80 and potentially tier 4 Professor X was that it was just gonna end up being the same hamster wheel. And I think for a lot of people, that's what MFF has become in one way or another. A hamster wheel, also known as a chore, that they basically do because they feel like they need to do it, but they're not actually enjoying the process of getting on the wheel, running on the wheel for an hour, and then getting off the wheel for the day. It's like your daily, it's literally like your daily exercise. Wow, I really wish I could gift those bios to someone because I certainly don't need them, and I'm certainly not going to do that because that's just giga toxic. So let's just go ahead and do that. But yeah, hamster wheel, chore, whatever you want to call it. And generally speaking, you can go on any number of rants and point to any one thing in the game and say that we need this or we need that, and you'd probably be right, So on the one hand, is this video really necessary? No. On the other hand, if I don't make these videos and the devs never upgrade any other content and they just keep churning out the same stuff that they've gotten comfortable and used to turning out, like, yeah, we're gonna get World Boss Legend Kang, cool. In a few months after that, we're gonna get another World Boss Legend, but it seems like the only thing they know how to do lately is World Boss Legend, right? They couldn't even get Dispatch Sector 13 right. So I feel like it's kind of irresponsible of me to just close my eyes and hope that they get it right. They might get it right. They might get it right without me, for sure, 100%. They might get it right without us complaining, 100%. But there's also a chance that they get it wrong. And if they get it wrong, then the game is gonna continue to decline in popularity. The player numbers are going to shrink, and it's what's known as a death spiral. Now, let me be clear here. I'm not saying that MFF is going down a death spiral. After my last video where I talked about the game, quite a few people reached out to me and they said, hey Alex, do you think the game is closing? Do you think the game is shutting down soon? Because of something that I said in the video. And okay, to be fair, what I said in the video was if the game continues down this path of the path of least resistance, the path of least effort, the game probably has another year-ish. And then if they improve things, the game probably has at least 2 more years. Okay, this is just my speculation. This is just my opinion. I have no inside information. Okay, and I'm not saying that the game is shutting down. When I say it has like a year left, I'm not even saying that it's going to shut down in a year. I'm just saying that I don't think people are going to want to play it in a year, right? And then from there, you can give it however much. Like, some games can drag on for years, long after they've quote-unquote expired. I mean, like, I would say Future Revolution expired like at least 4 months ago, right? Like, when they had after the Wolverine drop, which I didn't play, and then they had nothing for Black Friday, which was November, December. Well, November doesn't count because it's the end, right? December, January, February. That game is at least 3 months expired, in my opinion, but it's still going on, right? They haven't even announced a shutdown for it, and the shutdown would still be like 6 months ahead of whenever they announce. So the game has that. Do you see what I'm saying, right? So if I say the game has 1 year left, 2 years left, I'm not saying that right at that 1 year mark it's going to shut down. Right at that 2 year mark it's going to shut down. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't have clairvoyant capabilities, so please do not take what I'm saying as like the truth. But even then, it's more about like the game's lifespan, right? I feel like the game, if they continue down this course of least effort, they're just going to alienate and reduce their player numbers down to just the people who would play no matter what, right? The people like me who, like a horse with blinders on, are just going to keep running and running down that track until they collapse, but everybody else is gonna dip, and that's kind of like a death spiral. And to give you a bit more information on what a death spiral is, it's basically when a product begins to lose quality or popularity or both. And so because it loses a little bit of quality and a little bit of popularity, it doesn't even have to be that much, but because it loses a little bit, let's say 10% popularity and 10% quality, right? It loses that much, and so the revenue drops. Let's say the revenue for the game drops, or whatever the product drops, by 5%, right, quarterly. But then what the company sees is like, okay, this product has had its time, has sort of run its course. The market is sort of responding. The market isn't really interested in this product anymore. And this is not just for games. You can apply this logic to like literally anything on the market, right? unless you have something like government intervention or bailouts. But anyways, this is not the point I'm trying to make. Anyways, there are certainly exceptions. Okay, look at Bed Bath and Beyond, etc. But okay, so you have a drop in popularity, you have a drop in revenue. Okay, you have a drop in quality, whatever. You have a drop in revenue, which causes a drop in revenue, and so because of that, the company decides, rather than increase the number of people, rather than like try to salvage this, we're gonna actually cut back on the number of people working on this project. We're gonna divert some of the people working on this project to another project. So this product is gonna have fewer staff. So fewer staff, because of that revenue cut, now creates another drop, another 10% drop in quality and popularity, which then drops the revenue again, this time by like 8%. And then they do the same thing again. And this is what's called a death spiral, right? That's the death spiral that I'm talking about, right? Is as a product begins to lose a little bit of quality and a little bit of popularity, if the company decides to pull the funds that are like pull the sort of, the resources going into making the product and maintaining the product, it can quickly create a downward spiral to basically the death of the thing. And that can actually make the death of a product premature, right? You can, like, some mobile games have had a very long end of life, right? Like, they've stretched on their end of life for like 2-3 years, because that doesn't happen. But then you have other games. We've certainly seen some mobile games like Realm of Champions is probably a really good example. Like, it came out, not a good reception, right? Popularity and whatever declined, and it seemed like they weren't, like, there wasn't really a bunch of resources ready to be thrown at this project, and it sort of seemed like it started to slow down, and that's literally the kiss of death, right? So the kiss of death and the death spiral, that's a sexy way to spin. But anyways, that game got flushed down the toilet in like what, 6 months? Like, that game just poof, gone, right? So we don't know, right? Without knowing the internals, I can't really say for sure. But I think an example of this would be like the difference between how Netmarble handled Realm of Champions, because they had already acquired Kabam by the time that game released, right? How they handled Realm of Champions release, and how they handled Marvel Future Revolution's release, right? Both of those games are basically dead, but one of them is still out. One of them is still actively being played by players, and that's Marvel Future Revolution. So that's a good example, or a good comparison of like a fast death spiral versus a slow death spiral. But the death spiral has, like, don't make any mistake, the death spiral has already happened to Marvel Future Revolution, right? And that's why we saw that article last year or whatever, where they said, or maybe it was 2 years, no, it can't have been 2 years ago. But anyways, we saw that article, I think it was last year in August, where they said that they've cut 70% of the people working on the game. If you're reading that as a player or as a prospective player, you're not going to play the game. So it's sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? They see the game's not doing well, they pull resources, the game does worse, and it reinforces their ideas. Oh, that's why we pulled the resources, because the game was trash anyways, or the game wasn't, this was the wrong time to release the game or whatever. I'm not saying the game is bad necessarily, okay? Marvel Future Revolution had a lot of really good things going for it. The production levels on that game were absolutely fantastic. I don't mean to make this video just dunking on Future Revolution. I honestly think that game could have succeeded with some changes and with some alterations, but it's certainly naive to look at that game and not see that it was flawed in some very fundamental ways, which caused it to, sputter out and teeter out very soon after launch. Like, it had a massive launch. There was so much media media campaigns and like pushes to really get the game in the hands of everybody. I was part of a lot of those, sponsored contents and things like that. So I don't think the game lacked for eyeballs. So I think it was something fundamental about the game that, wasn't executed on well, or just wasn't, designed well for player fun and player experience. So yeah, the death spiral thing. Anyways, so what I'm talking about, sorry, this is like an extended rant on that, but basically what I'm saying is that if Marvel Future Fight doesn't do anything new, doesn't change things up in a way, that they're going to begin this death spiral campaign. And it can be a very slow death spiral, don't get me wrong. It can be very slow, right? Some of these games have dragged on for years. So Marvel Future, I don't know, Marvel Future Fight could go for 10 years, okay? I have no idea. But it is based, it's more or less, right? It's a very dramatic word, death spiral, but it's more or less what it is, right? As it loses popularity and loses revenue, they pull resources, which just causes that loop to continue. But they can change that. I know it took me 10 minutes to get into the actual answer to this, but they can change that because honestly, I don't think, as fun as New World Boss Legends are, I don't think New World Boss Legends are going to stave off death. Basically because players, it just becomes too common too quickly, right? It doesn't retain its novelty long enough. And so I don't know how much production and resources are allotted to New World Boss Legends, like if it's a very resource intensive thing to design, but I feel like they do lose their novelty rather quickly, and it just doesn't, I don't think it pans out. Like, I think they would be better off putting those resources towards something else after Kang. I think if Kang was the last World Boss Legend, that would be okay. If they revert, like if they, reallocated or redirected the resources that they were using to design World Boss Legend into something else. And essentially, it's a two-pronged attack, right? I think they just need to upgrade PvE and PvP enough so that the game can basically be evergreen, right? You're trying to reach a point where the game will be fun indefinitely while only being on maintenance mode, right? Like, how long can a game be on maintenance mode and still be fun? That's sort of the question you're trying to answer with these sort of live service games, especially once they've already grown old enough. So you can look at like Heroes of the Storm, you can look at Diablo 3, you can look at all these other games and sort of see what the maintenance team had to do or what they did to try to keep things interesting with the very limited resources they had. And that's sort of the key, right? If this game eventually gets its resources cut by like 90%, what can the remaining 10% do to actually make the game fun? And I don't think that the remaining 10% releasing a World Boss Legend every 6 months is going to keep players interested. It's just not, right? Players are not going to stick around for a World Boss Legend every 3 months or every 6 months. It takes way too long, and it's just not that interesting, right? And it's not like a new World Boss Legend is going to hold your attention for 6 months. It's just not, right? If you play Jean for like a month straight, you will have memorized all of her patterns, guaranteed. So there's no way that the next 5 months are going to be fun after you've already memorized all the patterns. So that's why I feel like they do need to, it has to be a two-pronged thing. They have to upgrade PvE and PvP, but it can't be World Boss. And I stress that it can't be World Boss because I think the devs have a massive tunnel vision for World Boss, and they think that because this is the most played game mode and the most popular game mode, they think this is the game mode that's going to continue to bring the players' attention, like this is going to continue capturing the players' attention. But this is really not going to work. So essentially, I could be wrong about this for sure, but I think if they made a meaningful upgrade, right, like one final meaningful upgrade to PvP, Timeline Battle, okay, and Shadowland, I think if they did that and they gave us ways to basically target farm specific resources that we wanted without getting into too much specifics, just make the game mode feel like we can make meaningful progress towards building our roster by playing the game mode daily or weekly, right? If they can answer those two questions, and if they can fulfill those two values for these game modes while expanding the number of characters that we use in these game modes consistently, I think that would set the game up for some very this is basically evergreen content, that's always going to be interesting. And they basically achieved that already with story mode. The problem with story mode is that it's autoplay, so you don't have an incentive to watch or to interact with it while it's running. You actually have an incentive to leave it be and go and do something else. And that's kind of antithetical design as far as like making the game entertaining, for like making the content evergreen, right? So like people do story because it's really good, not because it's like fun. So it needs to be, it has to have that fun factor. So whatever they do to Shadowland, like I've given out so many examples and so many ideas, but if they essentially had, just to give you guys a really quick example, if they essentially added like, let's say 50 new stages, and I know that sounds like a lot of new stages, but there has to be a procedural way that they can do it that doesn't take that much design time and resource time and downtime. But they just create 50 new stages, right? So a bunch of the stages could just be one of these abilities each. Like, I don't know how many abilities there are here. This is 3 by 6 by 9 by 12. So you already have like 38. I believe there are 38 abilities. You already have 38 abilities. So you only have to create 12 more stages on top of that, which is just a combination of these abilities, right? As long as the combination like yields a character. Like you wouldn't combine Cold-Blooded and Time Freezing because there are literally no characters of that type. So there needs to be a little bit of QA on this, right? You can't just be completely brain dead. But if they just created a bunch of Shadowland stages using these abilities, and then they just rotated them so that they're not always in the same place. So what I mean by that is it would be boring over time if I always knew when I queued up Shadowland that on stage 69, I had to use Professor X, because on stage 69 specifically, it would ask for Mind Resist and Mind. There are probably other characters that have those two abilities, but just follow me here with this rhetorical situation. So it would be boring over time. It would be really fun for the first like 6 months, sure, but we're talking about evergreen content, like content forever, right? So it would be boring if I could predict, right, every month, every week, I'm gonna have to use Professor X on stage 69, right? However, what if the stage changed? What if some weeks I used Professor X on stage 10, and some weeks I had to use him on stage 100? And you could scroll through and see and plan ahead, right? You could see ahead the map for Shadowland, and you could plan your roster accordingly. Like, that's interesting. That's evergreen content, because it's basically like you have all of these inputs and you just need to create a puzzle where we put these inputs in, but the puzzle has to reorganize itself every week or every month. Like that's essentially essentially the foundation of every game mode, right? So PvP has a restricted list that's restricting the number of inputs, and then as the player, your job is to, with the remaining inputs, create teams that are viable, right? So it's sort of like a fight, right? I keep doing this like it's a fucking Rubik's Cube, but you get what I'm saying. So they basically just need to do that for Shadowland. They need to, restrict the inputs on each stage, but then randomize them each week so that it doesn't become predictable, because it's way too predictable now. And I think that the devs thought, when they created this 3-stage situation, they thought that they had an evergreen solution for Shadowland. But this is not an evergreen solution, because the 3 stages are static. It's always the same 3 stages or 2 stages going up from 1 to 30 to 35. There are a couple of stages that will like randomly roll, like 22, I believe, randomly rolls or whatever each week, but otherwise it's completely static, and that's very boring. Especially in a game with so many characters. So they have to make it dynamic. They have to have it randomized each week so that the difficulty for each character shifts, right? So some weeks, Professor X and Captain Marvel and whatever, Ultron, they're going to carry me through Shadowland. In other weeks, because of the way the stage is rolled, Magneto needs to carry me through Shadowland, and Gore needs to carry me through Shadowland. And each week, and then they could have thematic weeks where, like, this week all the high stages are going to be villain stages, or this week all the high stages are going to be mutant stages. Like, this is truly evergreen content. This is content that you literally, like, you're going to have so many permutations. You're going to have so many different iterations of the restrictions being re-rolled that players will never get bored. And the ones that do, they can kiss my ass. Like, they're dumb, right? Like, there's no way you would get, like, that would be truly evergreen. Yeah, it's just beautiful. And then they just do the same shit for timeline battle, for PvP. Just literally do the exact same shit, right? All they need to do is they need to expand the number of restricted characters, right? And then they need to introduce new targeted rewards that we get for using other characters. The problem with timeline battle isn't necessarily that there aren't enough restricted characters. Like, the problem is that the rewards are not good. Basically, the only reward that is good from PvP is the crystals. That's it. That's the only reward people are really looking forward to. The rest of this is just caca. The gold is okay, but that's it. So you know, your target farming just the crystals. There needs to be a much greater incentive for this, right? There needs to be a much greater incentive. They need to do something else. They need to, like, for example, if you got advanced glory tokens for every win in PvP, that would be amazing. Just a simple change like that, because then you're incentivized to build these teams and to whatever, try new things in order to get more resources, in order to build out your roster, right? It has to maintain that loop. So yeah, they really need to focus with the game going into its 8th year and then 9th year after that, right? Like, we're coming up to the 8-year anniversary. They really need to focus on making a few final changes to core pieces of content to make them evergreen, right? Like, they've already made story mode evergreen. They never have to touch this game mode again, and players will always have some level of interest in it because the rewards are good enough and there's enough of an incentive, and the character, and it's dynamic. It changes every month, right? So this is really the best example that we have. They need to do that now for other pieces of content. They need, like, in my opinion, the two best pieces of content they could do it for is Shadowland and Timeline Battle. Now, they could do it for other content, okay? I'm not going to give you too many more examples, but they could absolutely make this evergreening for other content. The best example I can think of right now off the top of my head is Dispatch. What if, instead of having to do these Dispatch missions once, okay, these challenges once, what if these challenges re-rolled every month? Like, they refreshed. And by completing the challenges again, you got a 30-day boost to your Dispatch rewards. Again, evergreening the content. Obviously, they would have to re-roll these challenges, so they would have to create more challenges. They wouldn't just be the same challenges over and over again, because that's brain dead. But re-rolling the challenges, making new challenge, like having a larger pool of challenges and then re-rolling them, you know, and then pumping those out every month and giving players an incentive to go and do that again and again, is a way of making the content evergreen. And that's what they need to focus on to avoid and delay that death spiral, right? So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Sorry it took so long. Thanks so much for watching. If you're still here, appreciate it. Smash the like button, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.